Welcome back to another episode of Content Amplified. Today I'm joined by Brittney. Brittney, welcome to the show.
Hi, great to be here.
Yeah, Brittney and I actually knew each other in college. So this is kind of a fun reunion. We were catching up before the call. It's so exciting to get to talk to you again, Brittney. Our pathways have led us down this content route. So it's fun to kind of connect and all that fun stuff. But why don't you catch us up on who you are and all your work history and stuff?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Brittney Thompson. I got my start in marketing in 2013. I started out in an SEO agency where I worked as a writer and content manager. Left after about 4 years with the intent to take a sabbatical and rejoin the workforce. But I had picked up a couple of freelance clients while I was still in-house. So I kept those going while I was on my break, and one thing led to another, and I just kind of didn't look back. I realized I liked working for myself. I liked working with a variety of clients and being able to more directly and strategically help them with their content in ways I couldn't do when I was in-house. So I've now been running my own solo business for almost 10 years, primarily serving B2B tech and SaaS clients with content strategy and writing long form for audience-driven content.
Love it. I love it. And throughout this episode, my objective is to convince Brittney that Utah is the best place to live. She did live here once upon a time for college, and now she's back east, but we'll convince her that Utah is great. So this will be fun.
I loved Utah, but might be a tough sell.
Well, Brittney, for today's subject, we're going to talk about why we should shift away from the top of the funnel and move things more down funnel. Now, it's interesting. I've heard both sentiments. I've heard people talk about the top of the funnel being kind of the game changer. I've heard people talk about bottom of the funnel. Why do you believe that we have this shift that needs to take place, pushing content lower into the funnel?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I have a kind of nuanced take on that, but first and foremost, elephant in the room, AI. That's really opened the floodgates to lower the barrier to entry for that high level, surface level content that Tofu is really known for. But I think taking AI aside, long before it even arrived, we've been dealing with an oversaturated top of funnel market for a while. So I think AI is really just holding up a mirror to marketers and saying, this is what we have. Like, I'm just reproducing what's already out there. And it's not all that compelling. So I think it's really just a wake up call for writers and marketers to really reevaluate what content they're putting out there and how much of it. So it's not so much that top of funnel is going to go away completely, but I think we need to be thinking more in terms of what's farther down the content pipeline. And for whatever we are producing at the top, is it actually serving our purposes still? And I think AI has really changed that analysis. In a similar way, like when I first got into marketing, I joined the team right after the Penguin updates. That totally shifted the way we did content then. And, that was how we've been doing content for the better part of a decade. And now AI is here and it's doing the same thing, where we have to reevaluate what are the incentives? What is the purpose behind our content? Is it just to feed the robots? Is it just to feed the algorithm? Or are we actually talking to people? And it always should have been about people. But I think we've at times gotten away from that in the way that we do our Tofu content.
Very cool. I love that. So when you look at bottom of the funnel content, some people shy away from it because it's kind of hard to write if you want to do it well. This involves like actual research, actual analysis, actual data, actual insights, actual unique perspectives. How do you kind of use that information to move the needle, and how does that change bottom of the funnel content?
Well, it is going to be harder. I mean, I think that's why top of the funnel content has been so popular on marketing teams. Is yes, it requires work, but it's an easier lift. If you're answering those umbrella questions like what is X, you're just kind of repurposing what's already out there. It's a heavier lift to go and come up with original ideas and original perspectives, but the reward is that it's differentiating. You're not going to sound like all the other content out there. You're not going to sound like the robots because those aren't producing original thought. And you're going to see better connection with your target audience because you're actually speaking, hopefully, if you've done your research right, you're speaking to them and their particular pain points, their particular problems, and you're telling them, here's how we think about it, here's how we're approaching this challenge, and here's what we think you can do to solve it. But yeah, I mean, there's no getting around the extra work involved, but I think it's going to be worth it.
Love that. Okay, I'm gonna throw you a curveball because I'm just genuinely curious, so I apologize. When you look at the bottom of the funnel content, because the top of the funnel, like you said, is so oversaturated, I 100% see this. I mean, there's more LinkedIn posts than ever, there's more comments than ever, and people are just flooding the internet with, like you said, self-fulfilling AI written content as a regurgitation of everything that we've already written, kind of an idea. Is that bottom of the funnel content actually just moving up to the top of the funnel? Like, are you using distribution channels at the top of the funnel that normally would be for different kinds of content to distribute your bottom of the funnel content because people are doing so much more research on their own, things like that? How does that look? Or is it still staying there at the bottom of the funnel and it's just less of an emphasis at the top?
That's an interesting question. I think maybe a little of both. So I know that talking about the funnel, I know a lot of people think that's probably an outdated framework. We know, especially on B2B, the buyer's journey is complex, it's long, it's not linear. The funnel oversimplifies that. So to the extent that we're talking about the buying journey, I'm not sure it really matters as long as we're talking about what the goal is behind each piece of content. So whether that's a blog post and where it lives, that's more a question of what is it serving and is it achieving that goal versus where does it live in the funnel. But I do think, to your point, yes, we do need to differentiate our top of funnel content in ways that are going to reflect what we do lower in the funnel. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is acting as bottom of the funnel content, but I do think they need to reflect each other a little bit more and be more in conversation with each other, especially when you're getting into sales enablement where you're talking to sales and you're talking to marketing. There shouldn't be that silo that we often see where by the time that if marketing has done its job correctly, by the time you're getting into sales enablement and that sales call, that prospect should be had their hand held all the way through where they're already excited to have that conversation and they're not necessarily their questions have already been answered.
That's cool. I like that. Okay. So going back to content and how to write content, things like that, there is this general sentiment in the space that if it's written by AI, everyone kind of immediately writes it off. You know, there's all the posts about, oh, I can tell. I even heard someone yesterday say, I'll give you $300 if you can write a piece of content and have AI write a piece of content. And if I can't tell the difference, I'll pay you $300.
I
Kind of an
saw
idea.
that.
They're
Yeah.
that confident. And like obviously, like I can no longer use M dashes in any of my content, or it's an immediate like, it's this is written by AI. How do we make content still feel like it's human in an AI world? And like what's the balance with actually using AI in that process? What are some of your thoughts there, especially when it comes to bottom of the funnel content? Because that's such a huge part of it where I feel like people might use AI a little too much in that space.
Yeah, I think it's less about trying to not use the robots and more about whether you are writing from scratch or you're writing with the help of AI. The end result produces a human connection. It's really just about how what it's less about the craft and more about the results. So I care less about how you got there because like we said earlier, AI is just holding up a mirror to what we've already been producing, which has largely been robotic content that's been written by humans. So if it sounds like a robot, it doesn't necessarily mean it is. And that's a hard pill for writers like me to swallow, to be like, I got to up my game. If this is kind of the common denominator, we're not doing our job well enough. We need to write better, certainly. And also not just at the craft level, but just at the audience level. Are we actually speaking to their problems? And that's a strategic narrative problem, less so than a writing problem.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I like that you're saying any tool is not off the table. Let's use the resources, everything we have. It's about human connection. Again, another curveball. What can we do with our content to actually build human connection? Like, what does that tactically look like? I know a lot of people talk about, oh, we need to connect with our customers. We need them to feel the emotion and the passion of what we do and why we do it. What does that actually mean, in your
Yeah.
opinion? I mean, you've got so much experience here. What does that look like?
So it really comes down to knowing your customer. And so that's the back end heavy lifting that we were talking about before, where you've got to do your research. And that's not just a Google search. It's not just saying, what are our demographic list of stats about this user, or even, the audience persona. It's like, oh, this is Jill and she shops at Whole Foods and likes her coffee black. And it's like, that doesn't tell me about her buying journey. It doesn't tell me what problems she wants to solve. It doesn't tell me what concerns she has. It doesn't tell me really anything about her. So it's really about digging into your customer data and having that conversation with sales, going farther down the funnel and making that bridge between sales and marketing to get your voice of the customer. I mean, that's really going to make a huge difference in the way that you're writing, because you're going to be pulling basically the words right out of their mouth, so that when you've adapted it into whatever piece of content you're producing, whether that's at the top, middle, or bottom, the reader is going to see that and they're going to have that aha moment where they say, oh, you read my mind. This is exactly what I was thinking. That's exactly what I was dealing with. And it feels like magic to them, but it's research.
So it sounds like, and I'm going to ask you a bold statement, and it's probably going to be overly bold. So I'm curious for you to correct it and how you see it's different. Human connection with your customers can only happen by telling your customer's story. True or false, and why? I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Human connection can only happen by telling your customer's story. Maybe at a broad level, yes. I think relationships don't always have to be encapsulated in the full story all at once. I mean, that's kind of what marketing is about, right? Like, we know it's multiple touch points. So if you're talking about building a relationship, you don't build a relationship with one interaction. And so I think there's truth to what you said insofar as it'll be pieces of their story at every point. It might not be the whole story at every interaction, but you're making those little connections along the way, sometimes bigger, sometimes smaller. It might, not for nothing, a humorous meme can do a lot for your brand, even if it's not necessarily moving the needle in a measurable way, but it's doing something to build that human connection. And then hopefully in a way that is authentic and resonant to the brand and whatever relationship you're trying to build.
Love that. That's cool. I really like that answer. Thank you. So going back to bottom of the funnel content,
Mhm.
when we're working on it, a lot of the times it's also synonymous with sales enablement. This is the materials where someone is actively in the buying stages of their journey. Sales enablement, it's helping people kind of get over any objections and hurdles and all that kind of stuff. How do those two tie together, and what's kind of working in that sales enablement content bottom of the funnel?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I spend less time here as a writer. I'm usually farther up the funnel, but I think, let's see, I think with bottom of the funnel, it's again that conversation with sales. I know I've read recently that it's like less than half of sales teams even know what their sales enablement is supposed to do. Like, they don't agree on it. And so I think starting there and just saying, where are we misaligned? Can we all get on the same page on what sales enablement is? What is our bottom of funnel content? And opening that dialogue with the marketing team, so that you're having those conversations, so that you're not duplicating your work, and you're not off on two different planets, so that it's two different teams on our end, but from the audience perspective, from the prospect's perspective, it's all one consistent relationship. And so it should feel seamless from that handoff. So whatever marketing is doing should feel very much related to whatever they're ending up with at the sales point. Sorry, I kind of went off on a tangent there. Did that answer?
Yeah, that's
Sure,
great.
that's
I love that. Very cool. All right. These episodes are short, so we're running out of time. One final question. If you were to go to a business and they said, okay, Brittney, I need you to just rework our content strategy, what would you start to cut? What would you add? What would that look like to kind of remodel a marketing strategy at a business?
Yeah, I will cheat with the typical marketer response that it depends. But with that hedge up front, depending on how mature their program is, I would start first at looking at their top of the funnel and think about, what are you doing right now? How much are you producing? How is that mapped to the resources you have? And does that still make sense given the changing landscape we're seeing? And it's not so much that AI has really changed that you should be doing that regardless of whether AI is here or not, especially as that is moving the goalposts for everyone. It's really taking a hard look at what you're doing. I saw recently, I think Contentu cut 50% of their blogs content off of their website, and they saw traffic increase. So it's really more about quality over quantity, which isn't new, but I think we've maybe lost sight of. So it's just kind of recentering the audience and cutting the fluff. And I think that starts at the top and then making sure that it's mapped to your goals and to your audience journey all the way down.
That's awesome. Well, Brittany, we have run out of time. Thank you so much for the insights and all the information. It's been amazing. If anyone wants to reach out and connect with you online, how and where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn at Brittney Thompson.
Love it. For anyone listening, we will link to Brittany's LinkedIn profile in the show notes below. Again, Brittany, thank you so much for the time today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.